Could I explain the difference between breakpoints and rights of accumulation? I sure can. So a breakpoint is a quantity discount. I started out as a retail broker and ended up as an institutional broker. But when I was a retail broker, I sold a lot of the Franklin funds. And I don't know if it's still true, but Franklin had a breakpoint. $100,000 or more, you pay 3% instead of 4%. Right? So 3% is obviously better. So, if you invest $100,000 or more, $97,000 goes into the fund, $3,000 is the load, we call it. And then my broker dealer typically gets most of that, and I get what's called a payout. So I would tell you, if you're buying a traditional A share, listen, it would behoove us to get the best deal. And so I would tell you where the breakpoints are, and I would disclose it. First test question. I just told you the breakpoint is $100,000 or more. So Brian says, Dean, how much should I invest? I say, you should invest $99,999.
Ouch.
And Brian says, yeah, ouch. He goes, why? I said, because I'll make $4,000. And if you give me another buck, Brian, I'm only going to make $3. It's about me. That's called a breakpoint sale on every test. That's an unethical business practice. I wish other businesses were like ours, Brian, because sometimes I'll say, is there some deal I don't know about? Like, what do you mean? I was at the hotel and I saw people check out. I go, well, what people are paying for this room is all over the place. In my business, I have to tell people how to get the best deal. He said, well, Dean, are you here on business or leisure? I said, well, you tell me what the difference is, and I'll tell you what I'm here. He goes, Dean, if you're here on business, it's $400 a night. If you're on leisure, it's $200. I go, well, leisure it is. Now, in my example, Brian says, Dean, unfortunately, I don't have $100,000 for my initial investment. For my initial investment, I only have $80,000. I said, well, Brian, based on the breakpoint schedule, which varies from fund to fund, is stipulated in the prospectus at Franklin, I just told you it was 100 in my day. It looks like you're going to pay 4%. But if you, Brian, will sign, very testable, a letter of intent and tell Franklin that with over the next 13 months, you intend to invest another $20,000. We'll give you that 3% reduced sales charge up front. Brian, this will be great because you'll be able to buy additional fund shares. You can't be hurt, Brian, by signing the letter of intent. If you sign the letter of intent, the extra shares you get will be put in an escrow account. If you don't fulfill it, we'll back flag your account. It'll look exactly how it would have looked. So if there's any doubt, you ought to fill it out. He said, well, Dean, I'm not going to be able to do it, so there's no sense in filling it out. He calls me 2 months later. He goes, damn, Dean, I should have filled it out. I just won the lottery. I said, well, Brian, good news. We can backdate that test question for 90 days. That 90 days is inclusive of the 13 months. Okay, so breakpoint, Brian gets it up front. Okay, so Brian says, Dean, I don't have the money, so I'm not going to do it. I said, well, Brian, do you think over your lifetime you might be able to come up with an additional $20,000? He said, well, I certainly think so. I hope so. I said, well, let's get you rights of accumulation. With rights of accumulation, Brian, you're not getting the reduced sales charge on the 80. That's the distinction. You're paying the 4% on the 80. But when you do cross the $100,000 breakpoint, on that and all additional investments, you get the reduced sales charge. So that's the distinction. I had, Brian, a coffee cart guy who I bought coffees from, and he told me after I buy 10 coffee cups, he gives me the free one. I said, oh, you got rights of accumulation. He goes, what's the hell that? I said, you're going to give me a deal after I prove I'm a good customer. You have to prove it first. And he thinks I'm nuts. I said, you know what you should do is you should do a letter of intent. Why don't I just sign the card saying I'm going to buy 10 and you give me the free one this morning? He said, well, how would I ask for the coffee cups? I go, well, I haven't figured that part out yet. How would I back flag you? I said, yeah. One morning, Brian, I forgot my wallet. When I went to him, he said, Dean, you forgot your wallet. You don't need to run back upstairs and get it. This one's on me. We're going to switch over to that thing you were talking about where you get to reduce the free coffee up front. I go, woo, another convert from rights of accumulation to that breakpoint. So that's the testable distinction. Is Celeroro? I hope I apologize. I'm probably messing that up. So that's the distinction. Brian, anything you want to add to that?
No, that's it. That's exactly it. I kind of drew it out here.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So there's that 100K. Boom.
Is a change in sales charges.
By the way, one other thing I would bring up as it regards to this, make sure as a baby broker, that's a term of endearment. But, Franklin Templeton Fund Distributors or American Fund Distributors or, Fidelity or T. Rowe, they have people who work at their firms called wholesalers. And boy, they are a strategic resource. And so I would recommend once you get all your testing done, see which mutual fund families are on your approved product list and call a wholesaler and say, hey, can you take me to lunch and tell me about your fund family? They'd love to do that. I worked with a guy who was a Franklin wholesaler. I wouldn't have made it in his business, Brian, without his help because I was pretty clueless, so.